Hello, everyone. It's Mrs. Wallace. I wanted to do some videos for you to help you a little bit with some of the content. This is primarily about the Latin American revolutions, the Mexican War for Independence, and the South American War for Independence. I'm going to split this up into a few different pieces. This first piece is honestly about some context. This is not about the social hierarchy, which we already described in class with the Creoles and the Peninsulares and the Mestizos and, indigenous peoples and some of the issues between those particular groups. That's something that's definitely important, and there is a great deal of significance to that social hierarchy that really exists, in the beginning of the conquistadors, all the way to the Bourbon reforms in the 1700s and so on. But I wanted to do a little bit of context that kind of connects to the topics of the Mexican War for Independence and the South American wars for independence. In terms of what's happening in Europe, I think there's a lot of times where you're told something happens because Napoleon did something, or this happened in Spain, or this happened in Portugal, and it's a little bit hard to understand. So I wanted to do things from that perspective, and I'll note a couple of places where the colonists' history is important, and then you'll find a little video clip on the Mexican War for Independence and a little video clip on, Simon Bolivar and, Venezuela and Argentina and that sort of thing, should you want to use that or just have it in your wheelhouse, okay? So a few things, and this is kind of a packed PowerPoint, but hang with me, okay? Understand some of this is just context. I don't think you necessarily have to write a ton of this down, but have some of this slide just kind of in your corner pocket. The Napoleonic era we talk about from, let's say 1803 to 1814, really before that, we see the rise of Napoleon, the consulate, and then ultimately, these other roles, an emperor. But, in the time of the Haitian Revolution, we talked a lot about the French Revolution because it starts and kind of kicks off some of the revolts that begin the Haitian Revolution, and then changing dynamics in France. So, the French government that is in revolution shifts and changes. As that happens, we see ultimately Napoleon take over. So we've already looked at how events in Europe can affect the war in Haiti, for example, or Saint-Domingue at the time. But we also see this in the war for Mexican independence and also in South America. Just note the timeline is going to be a little bit later, where we really focus on the actions of Napoleon is more around 1808 and 1810. By that time, the Haitian Revolution is long over. Napoleon is out of Saint-Domingue at that time. Haiti is independent and whatnot. But let's kind of look at some of this context. So the first two bullet points are really some background prior to the advent of Napoleon, just so you can kind of get a sense of this. There is a French Revolution by 1791 that's underway. Spain is actually one of the countries that fights against France when it is at its most radical spot. Okay, so France radicalizes, they're going to kill their monarch and behead him. And there is uncertainty from other nearby monarchs, how France is doing. Spain will be against France in 1791. By 1796, Spain actually, ties a knot with France. They sign a friendship agreement. Okay, so Spain is tied to France, and this is still part of the French Revolution, but it's a French Revolution that's become a lot more conservative, under the auspices of a changing, government that has already gone through, the beheadings and the guillotine and all that stuff. Portugal, which is next to France and at times is invaded by Spain, is next to Spain and at times invaded by Spain, is going to be connected to Britain. So Portugal kind of connects with Britain, Spain ties to France. And some of this plays out in the colonies. So this kind of like little bit of a, issue between Britain and Spain gets ugly in a few places. At one time, Britain will cut off Spain from the colonies, which means the economy kind of drops, and Creoles are upset and merchants in Spain are upset. Britain will declare war on France in 1803. A lot of this is an effort to try to stop Napoleon. By 1806, Britain is already targeting Buenos Aires. So we get a little bit of like an opportunistic Britain that's still kind of in an expansion mode. Britain is fighting with France. Britain is also going to be fighting with Spain because they're friends with France. And so we get Britain, not only targeting these countries in Europe, but also targeting the colonies. Okay, so multiple times over, Britain will target Buenos Aires, challenge to Spain's, monarch, and Great Britain will basically be beaten back by Creoles, people in Buenos Aires. So that gives the Creoles a little confidence. It also kind of takes out, Great Britain, although they continue to try to have an interest in the Spanish colonies. By 1807, we have Napoleon calling for his continental system, which is basically an opportunity to edge out Great Britain. The continental system is all about ending any trade with Great Britain. No country can trade with Great Britain. So basically cut off Great Britain. It's like, kind of Spain payback time to Great Britain. And Portugal, which is a friend to Great Britain, continues to trade. You may have seen this painting. It's sometimes referred to as the 3rd of May. It's by a Spanish painter by the name of Goya. It refers to the action that Napoleon takes to get to Portugal, to force Portugal to be involved in the continental, to make sure that they're following this policy of not letting Britain trade. They go through Spain. And as Napoleon's army ransacks through Spain, we get a lot of Spanish communities who rebel against Napoleon's army. So despite the fact that the country of Spain is friendly to France and lets them go through to get to Portugal, there are people in Spain who are not so friendly to Napoleon's army, and we can see the army of Napoleon, the French on the right. This is really depicted as a slaughter of sorts, and so in the Spanish memory, rather, this becomes kind of a very significant moment of Napoleon's rise and the expansion and the way in which they take advantage of people in Spain. Napoleon's efforts to get to Portugal, which involve attacking Spain, and Portugal's response to this and Spanish response to this becomes really important to the Latin American independence movement. So of all the content so far, this is the one to kind of pay attention to. And this goes down in 1808 and kind of continues to about 1810. So Napoleon is trying to get to Portugal. As that occurs, the government of Portugal leaves Lisbon and moves to Brazil. So this will be the kickoff of what becomes an independence movement for Brazil, because the government will move to Brazil. There will be essentially Brazil in charge of both Portugal and Brazil. And in time, when the government finally comes back, there is a remnant of the government, left in Brazil. So we see at that point in time, Brazil call for independence in a very bloodless type of war. As Napoleon ransacks Spain to get to Portugal, Napoleon will also depose the monarch in Spain, who at the time is somebody by the name of Charles IV. He's kind of a little foolish of a leader, and it is believed that his son Ferdinand VII will be the next monarch. Napoleon deposes both of them. They're basically removed from the monarchy, and he places his brother Joseph in the role of monarch. So Napoleon had a way of doing this, kind of putting, his family in political power, and it's a way of expanding. So now Napoleon's kind of entire effort has expanded to Spain. And within Spain, there's resistance to this. So you might see this word juntas in your notes, okay? Some of you have asked about what this means and what this is. At the time that Napoleon puts his brother into the space of the monarchy, Ferdinand VII, who was supposed to be the monarch, is gone. And so we see a Spanish government in Spain rise up that basically is going to rule and militarize in the name of Ferdinand VII. So this is kind of like an ad hoc government that just gets created and isn't going to listen to Napoleon's brother. And it's kind of this Enlightenment idea, because this is about, John Locke's, movement to, revolt if you're not happy with the government. Think of like the Declaration of Independence, in the American colonies. Some of this is really about, power to the people. And it carries over from Spain, which ultimately sees many, many juntas, and they ultimately send delegates from various juntas to Cadiz, which is a city in Spain, to have a large scale group that's going to rule. But this also carries over to places like New Spain, where Father Hidalgo, who is a professor, who's somebody who is not a typical priest, he is somebody who's like really into Enlightenment thinking. He's read, texts that are forbidden. He's a professor of theology. He gets involved in this cry for Dolores. This cry of Dolores is a place. He is basically calling out. He may not mention the word independence, but he's inspired by these juntas. Some context about Father Hidalgo, not only him personally and his leadership style. He's a Creole, kind of on the poorer side, but somebody who comes from that background. He's going to call upon many people who are indigenous and mestizo, because in his growing up, he crosses paths with many of those people. But not only that, he is somebody who is inspired by the Enlightenment at a time when there's a great deal of famine in the area of New Spain. Some of this famine is because of the Bourbon reforms and the lack of silver that's in place in some places of Mexico. But we also see there had been a move to start a junta in New Spain, and it gets squelched by the Peninsulares, who largely maintain the political power. And so Hidalgo is kind of like a renegade Creole who isn't part of a junta, because that's already been tried. He's like part of a conspiracy group that are trying to keep this like alternative government, possibility alive that's going to be anti-Peninsulares. And what happens in New Spain, and we'll also see a similar pattern in South America, it's very similar. We see kind of royalists versus patriots. Patriots will be the people like Father Hidalgo who are going to fight for what becomes independence and essentially, in Hidalgo's case, greater equality, especially for Creoles, but in Hidalgo's case, also, other marginalized groups. And the royalists are those people who are fighting for the government that is now Napoleon's brother. So you have the patriots who are kind of, running, the royalists, let's say, are a mixed bag in Mexico, because it's also going to be, Peninsulares who are trying to maintain the status quo, and they are maybe in favor of no grand change. They're certainly not in favor of liberal, renegade juntas. They are much more conservative. So royalists are kind of, speaking on behalf of the traditional Spanish government and monarchy, whereas patriots are kind of acting on behalf of Ferdinand VII, who's not really officially in power. And there's also, in the case of Father Hidalgo, kind of an equality thing as part of motivation. In 1812, there's actually the establishment of a constitution, and we're going to call it a liberal constitution. It comes from Cadiz, which is a city in Spain, and these juntas have kind of blended into what becomes a Cortes, like a parliament of sorts. So we've got like a legislative body, and they create this constitution, and the constitution is very liberal, very Enlightenment oriented. Spanish Inquisition, gone. Freedom of speech is around, limiting the monarch, right? So kind of putting checks on the monarch's power. But the Cortes does maintain advantages for peninsulares. You know, they are still bettered in Spain by the monopolies that are run, all those economic benefits that Spain gets, they want to continue to get. So we get the high taxes for creoles, we get kind of the, entire, way in which the country of Spain was organizing this mercantile, economy for their own behalf. Creoles are going to respond to, they want the Cadiz Constitution to be, shared with the, Americas. This is where we see, after the Cadiz Constitution, we see the advent of the second